All right, so our speaker today is a returnee, if you will, right? Just had a little bit of information from Thomas not too long ago, but Tom Marshall from the South Dakota Geological Survey will be talking to us a little bit about monitoring the groundwater quality around us. So, welcome, Tom. And if you just go, that should take you right in.
Perfect, and this advances it. Great.
Yep, there.
So I will be talking a little bit longer than last time because this is a subject that I know more of than just giving you the latest updates on greening. Although I know a lot about greening Vermillion, I know this a lot more. So I doubt I'll finish the talk because I can go on about this. So as he said, my name is Thomas Marshall. I'm with the South Dakota Geological Survey. I have many roles with the survey. One of them is that I am the project manager, or I run the groundwater quality monitoring network for the state of South Dakota. Another one is that I am the survey paleontologist. So if you want, I can also give a talk on the prehistoric life of South Dakota at some point, if you're interested. Again, another subject that I can drone on and on about because I'm so familiar with it. But let's just go on with the groundwater quality monitoring network. Well, what is it and why was it established? So basically the goal of the network is just to see the water quality health of 25 shallow aquifers that are highly vulnerable. So these are aquifers that are used a lot for drinking water and a lot for irrigation, and they're in areas where they're under a lot of threat from contamination, from pesticides, urban use, overuse, you know. Some examples are like the Big Sioux, which is our big one, obviously. And then the Missouri aquifer is the aquifer here in Vermillion. And then the Tulare aquifer is north of Huron, and there are several aquifers north of Pierce. So we try to have aquifers that are near population centers and that are used a lot for various reasons. When we place these monitoring sites, we try to place them where there's typical land usage going on, so we don't place any monitoring site near any known point source of contamination. So it's anything that's just typical land use for that area, that's where we put the monitoring site. Okay, so we have, as I said, we do 25 aquifers. Currently, we have 148 active monitoring wells. And that number grew from 145 because we added 3 new wells recently. And those were in the Elm aquifer. And we have 83 sites, so that also increased. And don't talk about drilling the Elm aquifer because that was fun in and of itself. My drill crew still remind me of all the clay wells I had them drill, which is 55 feet of clay. And I don't know if you ever had to auger 55 feet of clay, but it's not fun. Because you got to clean up 50 feet of clay, and it can get everywhere. It can get on you, get on the augers. It's a mess. And they don't let you forget about it. Here's just a map. You can't really see it very well because of the lighting, but most of the aquifers that we are looking at are east of the Missouri River, and a lot of them are around here. So the Big Sioux is that long, thin one that runs down the east side of the state, and obviously that's an important one because you got Sioux Falls, Brookings, Watertown, all the major urban centers in South Dakota. Missouri's down here in the southeast. You got Vermillion, you got Yankton, then you run up here to the Vermillion East Fork. And that's important because you got the city of Madison in there, Tulare, Huron, and then the Elm because of Aberdeen, the city of Aberdeen. And we've got some sites north of here. Highmore Blunt, Cow Creek's an interesting little aquifer. Okobojo, all the way up to Spring Creek. We do have some things west river, but we don't have a lot. And the main reason why is because a lot of those aquifers that they irrigate from are hundreds of feet deep, and we're doing shallow aquifers. So a lot of our wells are no more than, say, 50 feet. So we have wells that range in depth from, say, 15 to 20 feet for the shallow one, and then 50 feet for the deep one. Some of our deepest ones do go up to 75 feet, but we try not to drill wells that are deeper than that because we're trying to look at the shallow aquifer. And then we do have Ogallala Sand Hills, and that is the northern tip of the Ogallala Aquifer. That aquifer is actually a lot more important, it's important here, but as you get further south, it plays a bigger role. And this aquifer extends all the way from South Dakota to Nebraska, Kansas, all the way down to the Texas Panhandle. And it's the Ogallala Aquifer in the Texas Panhandle that made it possible for farmers to grow in West Texas things like corn and other high water crops that were profitable. So in the 70s, they would grow all these high value crops. The farmers made a lot of money. They would go to the Texas Tech Games in style. And right now, the aquifer down there is almost depleted. There's some places in New Mexico where it's very much depleted. So the Ogallala Aquifer as a whole is a very endangered aquifer. And a lot of those sand and silts come from the erosion of the Rocky Mountains. Okay, and so I do want to point out, we have these squares. These are our monitoring sites with the red dots. And you notice they have IDs, ID codes. And that's to help us keep track of what we're sampling, where they are, so that when we create a week schedule and say we're going to sample the Skunk Creek, today we're going to sample SK2, SK3, we know where to go. We know where to look it up on the map. And I included this because this was recent, these ID sites for these monitoring wells. It used to be that we just actually used the well names, and that got awful confusing and unwieldy. So we shortened it to monitoring site IDs. And as you can see, at one time you only had 79 monitoring sites and 144. But most of that expansion came up there in the Elm Aquifer. We drilled a bunch of new wells up there, I think because they were wanting to look more at the water quality of the Elm Aquifer. So this diagram is to show you what a typical monitoring site would look like. So we have two basic monitoring sites. We have a single site, and for a lot of our single sites, it's because we can only put one well in because we only have enough aquifer material to support a single well. But we would like, ideally, to put in nested sites. And this is a diagram of a nested site. And a nested site means that you have two or more wells at a monitoring site. Currently, our nested sites are 2 wells. A long time ago, in the late 80s and early 90s, we had nested sites that had 3 wells. But we reduced that to 2. So we always have, well, obviously a deeper and a shallower well. You really can't have anything but a deeper, shallower well. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in a bit. But this just gives you a good idea of what our monitoring sites look like in cross view. And here's a picture of a monitoring site. So this is a monitoring site that we call OS4. OS stands for Ogallala Sand Hills, and this is the 4th monitoring site. And these are the 2 wells. And so this would be the deep well, and this is the shallow. Are you guys, is everybody having difficulty hearing me? All right, because I'm not really using the microphone, but I got a very loud, booming voice. People say I'm a loudmouth, and they're not wrong. Okay, so don't get too used to these 2 wells because they're going to go bye-bye in the fall. We're replacing them with new wells. So this fall, we're going to drill new wells in the Ogallala and the Rickery to replace some of these older wells because these wells were drilled in 1994, so they're over 30 years old. So when it comes to wells, that's pretty old. And we wanted to put in some new wells with newer construction and probably deepen them too, because water levels have been dropping. Obviously, we are in a drought right now, and as you all know. And when you're in a drought, water table tends to drop because there's less recharge from rainfall and there's more irrigation. You know, if you want to grow the same crops that you grew last year, you either got to irrigate it or find some other way to water it, and that can draw down the water table, and then there's less rainfall to recharge it. And that's a problem that we're encountering with a lot of our wells, is that our shallow wells that we drilled in the 90s may have had water in them, but now they're dry. And that's like in the Missouri aquifer. Here around Vermillion, that's been a problem. So anyway, this is what a typical monitoring site looks like. So you can see just typical land use, agriculture. They're in the road ditch, they're in the right-of-way. We don't have them on private land, we have them in the right-of-way, right off the side of the road. So we can just drive into the ditch, drive up to the well, and get it ready for sampling. So this is a life cycle of a monitoring well, or at least the first half of it. So this is a picture of a monitoring well basically being bored. This is one of our new drill rigs, and this white pipe here is the casing of a new well that we just drilled. So when we replace a well or decide to drill a new well, we'll go through and we try to find a suitable site. So we want to find an area that we can get into easily and safely, and also, again, an area where there's been no known point source of contamination. So just typical land use. We also want to know an area that has enough aquifer that we can put a well in it. And so we often will, there's another type of well called water rights wells. And those are wells drilled by another agency, DANR, called water rights. And those wells are what they use those wells for, is to track the depth of the water table in those wells. But they provide a lot of information as to how thick sand and gravel is and what the water level is. And so if we were to put in a new well, like in this case, we have that information that we can use. Then if we drill a new well, we'll have enough material and enough water to get a nice functional monitoring well. Trust me, when you drill where you don't have any information, then you're basically you're gambling. And there has been many a time where I drilled a nice well and the well's empty because I put it in clay. Because there was sand, but the sand was only 20 feet thick and the well's 35 feet thick and it's in clay, no water. I've done that. So we like to know what we're drilling into, and so we try to drill where there's other wells that were drilled or test holes or other geologic information that we can use. Because it's not cheap to drill, and all that. So we're done here drilling. We've got everything drilled. The mast is up, but we've got the casing in, and here's a close-up. So this is basically a new well. Is what it looks like. It's just PVC pipe sticking out of the ground with two fence posts next to it. So once we get the well installed, and at the bottom of this pipe, there's a special piece of pipe that has screens pre-cut into it. And that's what we call it, the screen. And that's where we collect the water from, because the water flows through the screens, and then when we put our pump in there, that's how we can pump water out of this well. But there's a few things we need to do before we go to the next step, because as you can see, it's just sitting in a hole. And you don't really want that. So we'll fill in the hole with the proper amount of a filter pack, which is basically, in this case, going to be native sediment. It's going to be collapsed sand and gravel or clay from the auger hole that we just drilled. And then we have to put in a specified amount of bentonite or seal, and then we cap it off with cement. And that's just to protect any upper aquifer zones that we might have gone through, and also to further protect that well from surface contamination. Then, once we have it properly filled, then we put in the distinctive yellow well protector. And it's a metal box that we put in, and it has a lid that you can open and close, and it's locked. And that metal box protects that white casing from damage. So now we have the well protector installed, and this is recently, so you can see all the sand and the gravel. It leaves a big pile. In about a year, that all will, of course, erode and grass will fill in, and it won't even look like we've been there except for the well protector. So, but we're not ready yet to sample this well, because when you drill a new well, that well is full of sand and sediment, so you got to clean it out. It's a process we call well development. So we have different procedures for well development, and it depends on the geology that the well is sitting in. So if the well is in fine sand, we have to take another pump, a bigger pump, and we have to turn that pump on as high as possible, and it's a process called overpumping. So we're basically just sucking up everything in that well and sucking it up as fast as possible and discharging it into a bucket just to get it cleaned out. We're basically vacuuming up the well with a pump. We also have another process called airlifting, and that is we take a nozzle and it's connected to an air compressor. We put the nozzle down the well, and then we can blast all the sediment and the dirt and whatnot out of the well to clean it up. So this is what we have to do to wells with fine sand. If the well is in coarser sand or gravel, then we have the preferred process is called surging. So what that is you take tubing and you put a surge block, which is basically a circular piece of plastic, and it fits down the casing of the well, and you push that surge block up and down in the casing. You're plunging it. And so when you're pushing the surge block down the well, it's forcing the water violently out of the screen, and then when you pull it up, it's forcing it violently into the screen. And that is what is loosening up all the sand, the sediment, and it moves up this tubing, and as you can see, it will come out into the bucket. And so you're surging. It's a process called surging, and that is a really deep clean of the well and the surrounding filter pack to get rid of all the sediment that we have in that well. We can only do this with wells that were in coarse sand and gravel. We found out the hard way that when you surge a well that's in fine sand, what we call sugar sand, it draws all the sand through the screen and it fills up the well. The well infills with sand. Now you have a plastic tube full of sand. You can't use it. So we have to be aware of what the rock is, what the geology is, to figure out how we're going to clean this well out. And that was through trial and error, just by going out and doing it and making mistakes. But we learn from our mistakes. So hopefully we don't make them again. We make a whole new set of mistakes. All right, so now the well's cleaned out. It's good to go. All the sediment's out of there. The water's clean. It's good. Everyone's happy. We're all happy. Now we're going to put the pump in, and it's a dedicated pump. So once the pump is put into the well, that pump lives in the well permanently until the pump gives out. Why do we do that? To prevent cross-contamination. We want to make sure that that environment in the well is as clean as possible. And we don't want to introduce something from the outside into the well. And so when you have a dedicated pump, where that pump never leaves the well, that reduces the chance of us contaminating a well. It's real easy to contaminate a well. Even if you like put sunscreen on that day, you could contaminate a well. We have two basic kinds of pumps that we use. At the beginning in '94, when we established the network, we used these big pumps called Grundfos. And these are really high-powered pumps, and they can pump at a rate of up to 10 gallons a minute. So they're really powerful pumps. They're about 1 foot long, and the intake is near the top. But they're also really expensive. And in 2021, we decided to replace a lot of these older pumps because they're about 30 years old. They've been used. It's time for some new pumps. We had a problem. I called the vendors, or various vendors for new Grundfoses, and they were out because of the supply chain issues. You couldn't get new Grundfoses. So that was a problem. However, there was a replacement, and these are something called sample champs. They're smaller, about 1/2 foot. This runs on a generator, so you need a big generator to provide the electrical power to power these pumps. And when these things spin up, they spin up about 30 amps. So it's a pretty big electrical load. These you can hook up to a car battery. So it's quieter, you don't need gas. You just hook it up to a car battery, and as you can see with these Grundfoses, there's all sorts of stuff you got to hook up and set up. That's pretty complicated looking, but for these sample champs, you just have to plug it in. So you plug this into that power socket up there, and then you put a tube onto that nozzle, that silver nozzle, and you're good to go. So it's really easier to use, it's easier to set up. If the pump gives out, all you have to do is twist off the old motor module, which this is the motor module. You twist off the old motor module, you put the new one on, and you're good to go. $250 and you can do that and fix it in 5 minutes. Even I can fix it. As the old Geico commercial said, even so easy, even a caveman could do it. But even easier, I can do it. So that's what we're going to use now are these new sample champs. They're cheaper, they're easier to use, and that's what we're putting into our new wells, and we're also replacing these old Grundfoses with those. And I know my water tech appreciates it because he has to hear a generator all day long, because that generator is loud. Okay, what am I for time? Okay, so sampling real quick. So when we sample, we test for nitrates and nitrites and ammonia. We sample for major ions, so that would include like calcium, fluoride, potassium. We also test for metals such as iron and manganese, and then we test for various pesticides. Now in 2025, when we did the sampling, we collected 85 full samples. A full sample is all the common ions, so like fluoride, calcium, sodium, potassium, nitrogen, nitrate, nitrite, and ammonia, phosphorus, metals, so iron, manganese, and then pesticides. That's what constitutes a full sample. And I didn't bring it, I should have got a picture of it, but it's like 8 bottles. So it's a lot of bottles we got to fill. We also did nitrite, nitrite, ammonia samples. We did a lot more of these, as you can tell. Now what that is when we sample a well, when we send it off to the State Health Lab in Pierre, the results come back and say the results say, hey, this well has high nitrates or high ammonia. Well, we'll go back throughout the season and sample that well again, about 3 more times, just to track what the nitrite levels or the ammonia levels are. And then because we're required to do QA/QC, which is an EPA requirement, we have to collect trip blanks and duplicates. So trip blanks is we take the ionized water, which we know what the constituents of deionized water are. We fill up our sample bottles and we send them off to the health lab to see if there's any detections. There should not be any detections in deionized water. So that's just a test of our sampling methods, and it's also a test of the lab testing methods. So if there's a problem, then we can go back and look at what we're doing wrong or what the lab is doing wrong, see if we can correct it. Duplicates are obviously self-explanatory. On some wells, we'll collect 2 sets of samples at the same time, and both sets should be pretty similar. If there's any differences, then we have to investigate. We did 21 aquifers. We almost did all 25. And then we updated our standard operating procedures last year in March. So that's pretty productive. And this isn't the network, but this gives you a good idea of what a sampling event is like for us. So we have a pump, and this is one of our portable pumps because these don't have dedicated pumps. We'll stick a pump down the well. There's the tubing. Here's the water coming out of the tubing. We fill up with a bucket. Well, why do we fill up with a bucket? Well, we have to count how much water we purge from the well because we're required to purge 3 well volumes out of a well. And in order to keep track of what we're purging, we just fill up 5-gallon buckets, and then we keep track of how many buckets we fill up. And that's probably the easiest way. Water tape, that circular thing hanging out the side of the well protector is the water tape, and that tells us what the water level is. Because you got to know what the water level is to determine what a well volume is, and then as we're sampling, we're always checking that water level to make sure that it's not going down too far. Because some wells, you can actually drain them dry during a sampling run, and that could burn the pump out. So, and then we have all sorts of, there, you can see those little plastic things, those are our sample bottles. And then we have all sorts of equipment. So when we're sampling, we have, this is an old water tech. So the person doing the paperwork doesn't have to wear gloves. They're known as dirty hands. I'm obviously the one taking the picture. I'm clean hands. And so every time I walk up to this well, I'm always wearing powder-free nitrile gloves. Always wearing gloves. So I wash my hands thoroughly in non-phosphatic soap, and then I wear these gloves because, again, I don't want to introduce any contaminants into the well myself. So anything I touch, including tubing, the pump, the water tape, and especially the samples, I'm always wearing my nitrile gloves to prevent contamination from entering the well. So we try to follow as stringent as procedure as possible to prevent our monitoring wells from getting contaminated as we sample them. Now, why do we purge 3 well volumes? Well, that is the industry standard for ensuring that you're getting all the water out that's been sitting in the well that's kind of stagnant, and that you're getting water that's formational. Because you want the water that's been sitting in the aquifer, not in the well, that's been stagnant. And 3 well volumes is the recommended. We don't always do 3 well volumes. We actually will do 4, 5, or 6. We actually do more than that. Getting close to time here. Nitrite, big one. This is the one that people really care about. Now, I always say nitrite. Now, why is that? Because nitrate is chemical formula is NO3 negative. Nitrite is NO2 negative. Well, we can't tell precisely. What we're looking at is the source of nitrogen. And we can't tell if it's coming from NO3 or NO2, so we combine it into nitrate plus nitrite. The ammonia is NH3. And I will explain a little bit about what happens in the well with nitrate, and ammonia. But so the EPA drinking water standard is 10. So anything above 10 could be a problem. So if that well has a nitrate level above 10, then that's when we go back and do repeated testing of that well. And we do have a lot of wells that are above 10. So I'm just going to proceed on because I don't want to get bogged down. What does this mean? So from 1989 to 2017, we compared the nitrate levels, and the nitrate levels are this axis right here, the x-axis, versus depth in feet below the water table. So what I wanted to look at was how far below the water table do you get certain levels of nitrates. And as you can see in the graph, the vast majority of nitrates, this red line is a drinking water standard. So the vast majority of nitrates above the drinking water standard, which is 10, you get about 25 feet below the water table. But the magic number for the really high ones seems to be about 10 feet below the water table. So you can see between 10 and 5, that's where you get a lot of your high ones. And we're talking up to 50, 60, 70. And that's pretty high. So remember how I said we had a shallow and a deep well? Well, the shallow well, the screen is generally within 5 feet of the water table. So the shallow well is going to be picking up all these nitrates, as opposed to the deep well, which the screen usually is about 20 feet or more below the water table. So it's picking up what's not the high nitrates, but it's going to be picking up, say, the ammonia. So not always, but in general, our deep wells have higher ammonia. Our shallow wells have higher nitrates. Now, that's not always true, but in general. So what's going on? Well, the ammonia, NH3, there's bacteria that lives in the water, and it takes that ammonia, and it, likes the ammonia, and it will oxidize or add an oxygen to the NH3 to create the NO2 or NO3. And that bacteria, lives in the more oxygenated. So the higher you are in the water column, the more oxygen you have. And then as you get further down, the less oxygen you have. So if you're a bug in there, you want lots of oxygen. And you get the oxygen, you get the ammonia, boom, you got yourself a nitrate. And not always the case, but generally that's what's happening in these wells. And again, it's just to illustrate that most of the nitrates above 10 occur within 25 feet of the water table. And this is why we want a shallow well and a deeper well, because we want to see what's going on with the deeper in the aquifer versus higher up in the water column near the water table. And the water table is not static. It will fluctuate over time, obviously. And then it's just another, where most of the higher nitrate readings have been 5 to 10, as you can see. But when you get below 25, then there really is nothing going on in terms of nitrates. This is a very complicated, I made this, it's very complicated. But this just shows you all the hits. So all the hits of nitrates that we've had over the last 4 years of sampling, 20, 21, 25, are in red. So it gives you an idea of where we're getting hits of nitrates. And as you can see, it's mostly, well, all of it, well, no, mostly, eastern South Dakota. There is a couple hits in Ogallala. This is a very interesting site, by the way. We're kind of lucky. There's a well site we call PC2A that's just north of Centerville. Between 2021 and 25, it's had the highest nitrate recorded at 102 milligrams per liter. Remember, the drinking water standard is 10. So it's 10 times the drinking water standard. We also are lucky, we got the highest ammonia recorded between 2021 and 25, that's 1.46. So the standard here for ammonia is 0.5, and that is, I think that is a European drinking water standard for ammonia, 0.5. So anything above 0.5 are these green numbers which you can't barely see. But as you can see, we have ammonia hits. Again, pretty much all over eastern South Dakota. The Elm Aquifer's got a lot of ammonia, and there's an aquifer called the Highmore Blunt that's got some ammonia. But elsewhere, wherever you get nitrate hits, the deeper well may have ammonia hits. And the Missouri aquifer's got all sorts of fun things going on down there. So we're in a pretty cool part of the state. The highest nitrate we ever had recorded was 198 in 1998. 198. Remember, drinking water standard is 10. I don't know why it's that high. There's really nothing going on out there. Somebody think one of the geologists joked that maybe we stuck a monitoring site on top of an old outhouse. Because remember, at 198, you're almost doing like raw sewage. Pretty much. But, I mean, 102 is not really a fun number either, so. And then the highest ammonia is 8.85, and that's in the Big Sioux aquifer. But, you know, the Big Sioux, that thing is running up and down the eastern side of the state here. That has all sorts of numbers too, so. Yeah, lots of ammonia, lots of nitrate.
Tom, can I ask a question?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if you already covered this, but these levels is this something that is like ever naturally occurring, or is this because of like pollution and runoff?
Well, it can be naturally occurring.
Okay.
So geologically, you can get high nitrates, and that was what may be going on here. Is this is actually maybe geological, but other sources of nitrates include runoff and sewage and fertilizers and such. And I think I'm getting in the cane, aren't I?
We got time for a couple questions, but we have some people that will have to be leaving. So.
Can I touch iron manganese real fast and then I'll call it good? I told you I'm going to talk a long time on this stuff. Okay, I'm not going to go do. So iron manganese. Just want to touch on it real quick. Why am I doing iron manganese? Well, these can be nuisance chemicals in water. So these concentrations above 0.3 for iron and above 0.05 for manganese. And the reason why it's 0.3 and 0.05 is because above those levels, it becomes a nuisance. Iron, obviously, if you have iron in the water, you get red spots to do laundry. And it's that red slime and stuff. You don't want iron. And manganese, have you ever been to Pierre and seen all the dark colored sidewalks? Well, that's manganese. And here is a picture of the groundwater with a lot of manganese. So it's pretty black. So just real quick, again, the Missouri aquifer, high iron, high manganese. So our little corner of the state's got all the really nice stuff, if you ask me. We're so lucky. But you see, it's very pervasive. And I had more to talk about it, but I'm just going to, well, I'm not going to run that. Actually, I'm not going to go through the grass, because I don't have time. Darn. Because I really want to, but I just don't have time. Any questions? Sorry. Yes.
So if you have a high report of nitrates or something, what do you do?
We'll report it, and then we also put it on our website. So if you go to the South Dakota Geological Survey website on an interactive map, then you can click on the interactive map, and then we're going to do reports, water quality reports from the survey as well, or start doing them again. But yes.
Is anyone monitoring the agricultural irrigation wells, Missouri Valley, 80 feet east of the coffee cup up on the bench?
So we're not monitoring any of the private wells. So all the wells that are in the network are state wells that we drill. But we do monitor the aquifers that some of those wells are in, and that would be the Missouri. So to get an idea, you can just find the closest monitoring well to your site or your location, and that should give you an idea. Yeah, we're not regulatory, so we can't regulate. So all we do is collect information and report this information. And apparently I have a lot of information because I went way over time. Yes.
So this isn't a question, but anybody who is interested in helping as a volunteer to monitor groundwater for these various chemicals, there is a volunteer group. Let me know and I can hook you up. We're always looking for new volunteers who get trained. It goes to the same lab, the state home lab here, and we monitor groundwater in 5 waterways in Cook and send it up to the state health lab. We've been doing it for about 6 years, and we're always looking for new volunteers.
Yep. Yeah, we can always use volunteers, but our monitoring network, though, is sampled exclusively by survey staff because nobody else has access to those wells because those wells are clean wells, and so we try to control access to the wells so that we don't get accidental contamination from somebody else. So they're locked with a lock, and we have the keys. So if you walked up to our wells, you couldn't get in them. So, well, hopefully I didn't go too long. Again, if you want more of my droning, I do have a talk on the prehistoric life of South Dakota, but I go on even longer about that than this. Yes, but if you may not want me back, and I understand.
All right,
Yes.
hold on, Thomas, you got to do our drawing.